Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage. Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage. And someone will say his career can never be saved. Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage.
Welcome to Just Nicolas Cage, where I very slowly work my way through Nicolas Cage's filmography. And today's forecast is the 2005 dark comedy drama film The Weatherman. In The Weatherman, Nicolas Cage plays a relatively successful weatherman who's unhappy in life and he's gone through a midlife crisis. His relationship with his family is strained, and people on the street throw milkshakes at him all the time. And the movie follows his attempts at getting his life back together by trying to mend his relationships, pursuing a more lucrative job opportunity, and finding a hobby. You know, with most of these Nicolas Cage movies that I've reviewed that I hadn't seen before, I had a rough idea of what I was getting into beforehand, based on things I'd heard about the film, or based on the directors of the work, or in a lot of cases viral clips from said film of Nicolas Cage losing his shit. But looking at the poster of The Weatherman, you've got Nick Cage walking down the street with a bow and arrow, and the tagline is, he's gonna take his best shot at life. And then 5 minutes into the movie, you get lines like this.
Guess that's why they think they know me. But they don't really. I'm not a hill of beans. I have a plan.
So naturally, I thought this movie was going to be like a falling down scenario, where this unassuming weatherman who's been beaten down by life snaps and goes on a violent killing spree. And while it seems like at multiple points in The Weatherman that the story is going to veer into that territory, it never does. The Weatherman is more of an introspective character study about a man who struggles with ennui and discontent in his life. And instead of having a Michael Douglas-style breakdown that leads to murder, he actively tries to mend his problems by trying to better himself. I mentioned earlier about how knowing who the director is kind of gives you a clue about what kind of film you're getting in for. But in the case of The Weatherman, that's not much of a help. The Weatherman is directed by Gore Verbinski, and when you look at his filmography, this movie really sticks out. 2003, Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl. 2005, The Weatherman. 2006, Pirates of the Caribbean, The Dead Man's Chest. 2007, Pirates of the Caribbean, The World's End. One of these things is not like the other. It is weird that sandwiched in the middle of this trilogy of big overblown blockbusters is the film The Weatherman, a quiet, contemplative, almost art house-like film. I'm not saying that The Weatherman is directed badly. Some of the shots are striking and the editing is very impressive at times, but what I mean is it's largely quite minimalistic compared to the big genre films Gore Verbinski is known for. But the person involved with The Weatherman that this movie is on brand for is the screenwriter Stephen Conrad, who also wrote the screenplay The Pursuit of Happiness, which is the story of a man trying to better himself financially. He also wrote The Promotion, a movie about two assistant managers at a grocery store competing for a promotion, and The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, a story of a worker at a magazine company that lives a mundane life and goes on a life-affirming journey. All of those films have elements of themes you can find in The Weatherman. Steve Conrad seems to really like that idea of the dissatisfied middle-aged man struggling against corporate America and the American dream. Tonally, The Weatherman toes the line between like melancholic and nihilistic, alongside moments of optimism and humor. And this movie involves some very heavy subject matter, like depression, impending death, and even child molestation. And like I said, the presentation is largely quite understated. It's full of deadpan voiceovers and lots of shots of Nicolas Cage moping around. But despite Variety magazine calling it overbearingly glum, and one of the biggest downers to emerge from a major studio in recent memory, it isn't all despair and misery. Like I said, there's even several instances of humor, and it was actually marketed as a comedy. I'd specify it more as a dark comedy or even cringe comedy. Like Nick Cage trying to playfully throw a snowball at his ex-wife, but he throws it too hard. And this part where she accidentally talks about blowjobs in front of her daughter.
And that's why I lacked enthusiasm when your cock was in my mouth.
Hey, hon.
Most of that awkward kind of humor didn't really work for me, but to me the most effective parts of the film is when it fully embraced its quirky and off-kilter kind of surreal quality. Like, there's a random scene where we see Nick Cage's character dressed as Abraham Lincoln at a promotional event at some festival, and we see him having sex with a woman who's wearing that kind of Oktoberfest German outfit, and he's still dressed as Honest Abe, which I guess I can now tick off my bucket list of things I would like to see before I die. I also didn't expect the words camel toe to be said in this film as many times as they were. It's said 11 times, by the way, I counted. And I definitely didn't expect Sir Michael Caine to give an explanation as to what a camel toe is.
It means the crease in her vagina that they can discern through her clothing.
What?
Camel toe.
I guess that falls into the awkward cringe comedy category. But to give it some context, Nick Cage's character's daughter is being bullied for having a camel toe. And there's a scene where she says that she thinks that people call her camel toe because camel toes are tough and strong. And Nick Cage doesn't have the heart to tell her the real reason. As far as the scene involving a young girl's camel toe, it's actually kind of funny and oddly kind of sweet. But by far the best and funniest scene in the film is when we see this little glimpse into why Nicolas Cage's character's marriage fell apart. In the flashback sequence, his wife sends him out to get tartar sauce, and we get this extended stream of conscious voiceover from him that spans a wide range of subjects.
Tartar sauce, tartar sauce, tartar sauce, tartar sauce. Man, I'd like to put my face in there. Right in there. Tartar sauce. I like eating pussy. Tartar sauce. A lot of guys don't. Well, maybe they do. Maybe that's just black guys. Tartar sauce. Neil Young. Fuck, it's cold. Neil Young. Why am I thinking about Neil Young? Neil Diamond. Neil. There's not a lot of famous Neils. Is this Wednesday? I wish I had 2 dicks. I thought the whole family was going to learn Spanish together this year. That never really happened. I haven't had a Spanish omelet in a long time.
Eating pussy, 2 dicks, Neil Young, and a Spanish omelet, all in the span of 30 seconds. That's impressive. I do like how realistic that is, though. It's not a contemplative soliloquy, it's a bunch of scattershot thoughts being blurted out. And that's often how the human brain works. I wonder what it would be like to have both male and female genitalia. Shit. But seriously, I do really like this scene. Adaptation did something kind of similar with its voiceover, and it also reminded me of a scene in BoJack Horseman.
Oh, is it night suddenly? Suddenly sundown. Suddenly Sue's Town. What was that show? Suddenly Sue's Town? Brooke Shields, something. Show was on for like 5 years and now nobody. Oh my god. Is that life? You're there, you do your thing, and then people forget. Forget it, Jake. It's Sue's Town.
In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if that BoJack scene was inspired by the Weatherman scene, because they both kind of have the same punchline of the guy forgetting the item that he was meant to buy.
Where is the tartar sauce?
They were out.
Did you get the milk?
I do kind of wish that the Weatherman embraced this kind of ADHD voiceover style for more of the movie, because a lot of the rest of the voiceover in this movie is comprised of these like slick, composed expressions of thought, and obviously it would be annoying if the whole movie was a bunch of gibberish like that. I just wanted it to embrace the digressions a little bit more like this part.
The whole thing is who gets hit with a fucking pie anyway? Did anyone ever throw a pie at Thomas Jefferson? Or Buzz Aldrin? I doubt it. But this is like the 9th time I got clowns get hit with pies.
But in terms of the surreal in this film, take a look at this giant apparition of SpongeBob SquarePants that looms by the window during the nighttime in this one scene. This image of a massive SpongeBob with those lifeless eyes like a doll's eyes is creepier than anything I've seen in a mainstream horror movie recently. My personal theory is that SpongeBob heard Nick Cage's character saying tartar sauce 5 times and he showed up like Candyman.
Tartar sauce.
It's actually explained in the movie that Nick Cage is just imagining a parade that involves a SpongeBob float. And in the last line of the film, he states that he's in front of SpongeBob as a metaphor for his position in life. But I prefer my tartar sauce Candyman theory. Even the musical score is kind of weird at times. It's mostly conventional atmospheric Hans Zimmer music. Sometimes it gets jazzy to reflect a turbulent mood. But then you have this strange repetitive noise with brief electronic bloops. It plays multiple times in the movie and it sounds like a reject from a Radiohead album. So let's talk about the cast and characters, starting with the titular weatherman played by Nicolas Cage. His character's name is Dave Spritz, which is a fun little bit of nominative determinism. For those who don't know, nominative determinism is the theory that a person's name has an influence on what they do later in life. For example, a man named Otto Octavius inventing robotic appendages that resemble octopus tentacles. Or in a real-life example, a woman named Sarah Blizzard being a weather reporter, which is very on brand for what I'm talking about. But in The Weatherman, Dave Spritz's birth name is actually Spritzel, which I still think counts, it has the word in it. But he changed his name to Spritz after becoming a weatherman under the suggestion of a station manager, because he said it sounded refreshing, but other people in the movie do not care for it.
What kind of name is Spritz? It's a bullshit name. It's a TV name. He's bullshit.
But what's interesting about his name is that one of the themes of this movie is about being defined by one's occupation. People on the street constantly call him the weather guy and ask him what the weather is going to be. He doesn't like being reduced to just his job, and part of his arc is coming to terms with that. But I think by publicly introducing yourself with the name Spritz, which has a definition meaning light rain, it was always going to be hard to disassociate that name with the concept of the weatherman. There's actually several similarities between the character Dave Spritz and Nicolas Cage himself. In an interview with Roger Ebert, Nicolas Cage talked about how him and his character were both divorced, and how he channeled those feelings into a character that's trying to put his family back together. And there's other connections between Cage and Spritz. As Roger Ebert pointed out, they both grew up in the shadow of a famous family member. Dave Spritz's dad won the Pulitzer Prize at the age of 33, and Jimmy Carter called his dad a national treasure. And obviously Nicolas Cage has a very famous uncle that directed The Godfather 1 and 2. And just like Spritz, Nicolas Coppola changed his surname. You could also argue that him being pelted by food repeatedly represents the negative reviews that Nicolas Cage has received over the years. Almost like a rotten tomato in the traditional Shakespeare sense. Nicolas Cage has played somewhat similar roles to this character before. There's shades of his character in Adaptation and Dream Scenario. They're all these relatively unremarkable guys trying to find a purpose. There's also shades of the Family Man here. In fact, I'm not entirely convinced that Don Cheadle's timeline-altering shenanigans aren't responsible for what we're witnessing in this movie. Nicolas Cage's performance is very good here. In the last movie he was in, Lord of War, I was talking about how his character is constantly smiling. But here it's the opposite. He has this constant hangdog sad look on his face the whole time. And look how his fake performative smile to the mirror turns sad on a dime. I found his character sympathetic and likable for the most part. He is a flawed person. He does a counseling trust exercise with his ex-wife. We have to write something down that you did that affected your partner that you're not proud of. And then you give it to the other person, but nobody's allowed to read it. And of course Cage violates her trust by immediately reading it. That's a dick move, but I still felt sorry for him. At the very least, he doesn't deserve to have all that stuff thrown at him. Nicolas Cage's performance is mostly very downplayed and deadpan. His character is less confident than your typical Nick Cage character. And even when he has outbursts, they're kind of stilted, awkward outbursts.
You call me a dildo, it is my business, Spritz.
You are a dildo, pork fuck. Porker?
In any other movie, he would have said, pork fuck porker! But that's not who his character is here. And his big rage moments mostly come off as sad.
I have kids! I have to go see my kids! You put fucking pie shit on my coat! I have to see my kids with pie on me, man! I have to see my family!
Cage really does nail the emotional scenes in this movie. It's a great performance, and I thought it was a compelling character. He's multifaceted, and I enjoyed seeing him become more self-assured with who he is. And I thought he had a satisfying but realistic arc by the end. Nicolas Cage's character's relationships with individual members of the family is also an integral part of the film. His daughter smokes and she's unhappy, and Cage tries to bond with her. I liked her scenes with Nick Cage and the growth they went through together. There's even a little shopping montage, which I usually hate, but I thought it was kind of nice here. Cage's son is played by Nicholas Hoult in what I think was his first Hollywood film, and it is kind of fun seeing the two Nicholases together before they were Dracula and Renfield. There's a subplot involving him being sexually abused, which I found a bit jarring compared to the rest of the film. Maybe that was intentional. And it's a bit of a shame that he doesn't get as much screen time with Cage as the daughter does. But their scenes together were good. I've already mentioned the ex-wife, and she's also a good character. In previous reviews, I've talked about how Nicolas Cage's character's partners, or in this case ex-partners, can be quite generic or one-dimensional characters, but I thought this character was written quite well. It would have been easy to write her as a bitch of an ex-wife, but she is quite reasonable. And as sympathetic as I said Nick Cage's character was earlier, you can also fully see why her character would be sick of his shit. There's a great moment where she lists all the things she hates about him.
I hated your hair. I hated your ugly legs, your forearms. I hated kissing your lips, Dave, okay?
Goddamn, she went full Kendrick Lamar diss track on him.
I hate the way that you walk, the way that you talk. I hate the way that you dress. I hate the way that you sneak this. If I catch flight, it's gonna be direct.
Also, Michael Caine plays Nicolas Cage's dad in this movie. I don't know how I've gone this long without mentioning that. He has a questionable American accent in this movie. You can even hear his Michael Caine-isms creeping through.
It's fruitless for Shelley to be dancing. She should find another interest that would be more rewarding to her.
Having tremors, that's the reason that I went in. Pritch read my scans.
But who am I to talk about questionable accents? Recently in my YouTube comments, 2 people said they thought I was Scandinavian. But accent aside, it's a good performance. He has some moving scenes and it's an interesting character. His character is overly judgmental, and there's even interesting parallels between him and Nick Cage and his daughter.
Can I have some money?
You don't have any?
No.
You're 12 years old. You shouldn't be walking around without money, okay, Shelley?
You should carry more than $1, David. You're a grown man.
And I did really like the words of wisdom that he had in the movie.
Do you know that the harder thing to do and the right thing to do are usually the same thing? Nothing that has meaning is easy. Easy doesn't enter into grown-up life.
If he ended that sentence with Master Wayne, then you could just pretend that he was playing a transatlantic Alfred the Butler. So overall, I like this movie. I thought it was interesting. It's definitely quite ambitious, especially in the script. They threw a lot of stuff at the wall, and I don't think all of it stuck. Mainly, I don't think the shifts in tone entirely work. But there is a lot here that does work. At the front and center of it all lies a fascinating character. I do love it when Nicolas Cage takes part in a meaty character study. And the film is genuinely moving and poignant at times. I don't think it's for everybody because of the tone and some of the pacing, but I definitely recommend it to Nicolas Cage aficionados because he's great in it. I also think it might be a movie that you have to rewatch to really unlock all the nuances. I think that my review of the film only scratched the surface in terms of the deeper themes. When I watched it, my takeaway was that Nicolas Cage's character was a decent guy trying to do the right thing for his family. And then after I wrote up my notes, I watched this video, and the guy pointed out that everything that Dave Spritz does in an attempt to reconnect with his family is insubstantial and lacking in weight. Like how with his daughter, he just kind of throws money at the problem. And then he tied that into the fast food metaphor, and its connection with his job as weatherman. And he also talked about how the setting of winter in the film is a perfect backdrop because of its correlation with seasonal affective disorder. And none of that even occurred to me. I just went on about SpongeBob for 5 minutes. This movie is deeper than I thought, so I think it might be one to rewatch one day. Maybe once I'm at my midlife crisis. I think once I'm a depressed 41-year-old, it will really resonate with me. And right now, I'm only a depressed 31-year-old. So the next movie that Nicolas Cage was in was The Ant Bully. So until next time, guys, thanks for watching.